Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. We're going to unpack the profoundly moving narrative of the Impala and the architecture of memory. It gives us this incredibly rare, vivid look at exactly how our minds store and retrieve our deepest past. It's not really just a story about a dream. It's a profound look at the physical shape of grief, the unyielding march of time, and, well, the honestly astonishing capabilities of our subconscious. We're going to map out how memory anchors itself inside us and why it sometimes just comes rushing back when we least expect it. Old friendships surfacing without warning, rising up through the decades. It's a striking image, right? The narrator points out that he couldn't even tell you what brought his old friend Larry to mind that particular evening. I mean, it might have been a passing car, a quick snippet of a song, or honestly, maybe just a specific quality of light in the late afternoon that perfectly matched a stored afternoon from half a century ago. It really goes to show that our memories aren't just sitting neatly on some dusty shelf in our brains. They're submerged, they're buoyant, and they are absolutely capable of rising to the surface without any conscious effort on our part whatsoever. All right, let's move into section 1, the mind's filing system, decoding the subconscious. So think about this. We don't actually consciously choose what we remember. Our brain essentially acts as this unpredictable, invisible archivist. In the story, the narrator just goes to bed around 10 o'clock, completely worn out by the day, and then boom, without any seam or transition, he's suddenly standing right in his childhood friend's yard. The mind just made the executive decision to pull this exact file from the archives. It didn't ask for permission, it didn't give him a heads up, it just unlocked a door and a back room he didn't even know he had. Now, you might be wondering, how did his body know exactly where it was the second he woke up in a 50-year-old dream? Well, it all comes down to this concept of internal geography. It's not just about, remembering what a street roughly looked like. It's a bodily, bone-deep certainty. His feet knew the ground. His eyes instantly knew the house. This happens when you visit a place so many times in your youth that it literally becomes a structural part of your identity, way before you're old enough to understand the tragic reality that landmarks like these can actually be lost forever. Moving right along to Section 2, Constructing the Past, the Eerie Precision of Dreams. 50 years. That is the massive, half-century gap between the dream and the reality here. And yet, here is a truly surprising fact. Even after 50 years of aging, the subconscious mind perfectly and effortlessly maintains the exact dimensions of a specific bush from a particular summer. And it does this without us even trying. The narrator isn't just struck by the weirdness of traveling back in time. He's completely stunned by the sheer precision of it all. The yard is worn down in the exact right places. The mind kept it perfectly intact for 5 decades, just waiting for the right night to project it back into his consciousness. The completeness of this internal filing system is it's staggering. We're not just dealing with a faded visual photograph here. We're talking about a full-blown sensory recreation. Think about the details, the sight of the right paint color, the exact specific sound of that 1960s Chevy Impala's engine, the physical touch of rolling down a passenger window that, famously, sticks if you move it too fast, and a smell so specific, this buried combination of vinyl, youth, and an old air freshener, that encountering it again literally feels like a physical blow. This right here is the heavy, all-encompassing architecture of a true memory. That brings us to Section 3, the gulf of time, the physical distance of years. So, the narrative arc shifts pretty drastically here. When Lee calls out his friend's name, his own voice completely surprises him, because, well, it's the voice of a 70-year-old man. It's entirely wrong for this bright, youthful summer morning. He catches his reflection in the window and sees an old man. Meanwhile, Larry is just 17 or 18. He's moving with that easy, comfortable confidence of a young guy who assumes his whole life is just smoothly arranged ahead of him. They're sitting literally inches apart in the Impala, but Lee feels the years between them as this immense physical distance. It's an unbridgeable gulf of time that only he has the burden of seeing. If we map out this timeline, the brutal math of the tragedy really hits you, and it explains exactly why Lee feels this suffocating, desperate need to change history. Look, Lee was the best man at Larry's wedding. They stood together, fully believing the future was long and wide open. But Larry didn't make it to 39, he died 30 years ago. So as the familiar streets of their old town are rolling by outside the car window, the urgency just builds and builds inside Lee's chest. He's been handed this impossible chance to sit next to his dead friend, and he feels he absolutely must warn him before the dream ends. And that leads us to the emotional climax in Section 4, the impossible warning, breaking the timeline. So Lee tries to warn him, but instead of belief, Larry reacts with this fond exasperation. It totally proves that a 17-year-old simply does not have the mental frameworks to process a tragedy of that scale. Lee tries to tell him that something awful is coming, but Larry doesn't even get mad. He just gets annoyed. He gives Lee that highly specific look. You know the one, right? The look only old friends can give you. The one that says, "I know you way too well for this." Larry just thinks it's a prank. He keeps his eyes on the road, entirely unbothered by the frantic old man sitting next to him. I want you to really think about this impossible question for a second. What arrangement of words exists that could actually make him believe? The tragic, heartbreaking reality is that some warnings simply cannot be translated across the chasm of time. There's no magic arrangement. There is no sentence for it. You literally cannot make a comfortable boy sitting on a summer morning in a good car understand that his life is going to be cut tragically short. The recipient just doesn't have a shelf in their mind where a massive, devastating truth like that could sit. And recognizing this profound limitation, Lee just swallows his words and watches the town pass by in silence. Let's transition to our final part, Section 5, The Weight We Carry, Returning to Waking Life. As the old high school appears through the windshield, hitting Lee right below the ribs with a wave of emotion, the dream, well, having delivered its purpose, it just lets go. It doesn't snap away violently, it fades out. The edges of the street soften, the morning light starts to thin. This incredibly solid, hyper-realistic world from 50 years ago slowly becomes entirely transparent, kind of like a backlit photograph fading out. Lee wakes up in his dark, quiet room. He lies still for a long time, desperately trying to hold on to that specific smell of the vinyl and the sound of Larry's impatient affection. This brings us to the core thesis of the whole experience. Grief isn't a problem to be solved. Actually, it's more like a permanent weight that simply becomes part of who you are. Lying there in the dark, Lee reflects on Larry's wedding day back in September of 1992, remembering how strongly he believed they had all the time in the world. You know, we so often hear that time heals all wounds, or that our burdens naturally lighten over the decades, but the architecture of memory tells us a very different story. Some things, they never get lighter. They just seamlessly merge into the heavy, enduring weight that makes up who you are today. To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought. Right now, literally as we speak, there are vivid, multi-sensory rooms hidden away inside your own subconscious. They are perfectly maintaining the exact shape of a childhood porch, the precise sound of an old friend's voice, and the specific smell of a summer afternoon from decades ago. They are just waiting for a quiet night or maybe a passing car to rise to the surface. So, when you close your eyes, what landmarks of your own internal geography are waiting away in there, perfectly unchanged, to invite you in for one more ride?